A long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, I didn't think you were going to do that, man. I'm proud of you.
All
On
the
the
people who are
spot.
joining are probably thinking it's a concert now.
Right, right.
And I said, brother, help me please. But he wind up not in need. I got down on my knees. Whoa.
Uh-oh. Oh, man, we're taking them back.
Come on now.
I couldn't last for long. Okay, let's get this started.
The missus is gonna come start asking what's going on in there.
Exactly.
All right, let's get started. I don't know how I'm going to follow that up. That was a tough stage set. If I was nervous before, I'm super nervous now.
That's a little icebreaker.
I'd also like to stream you in through our Nest to my son's nursery and ask you just to like put him to sleep every night. That was
There
beautiful.
you go.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our third event in the Lean Into Allyship series. We are so glad to have you all with us here tonight. Again, we want to thank the generator for providing the technology to make this event possible. And of course, start with just a huge thank you to our panelists tonight, who we will get to learn a little about as they introduce themselves shortly. We just really wanted to kick things off with our would-be allies, as Dr. G calls us on the call, telling us where you're joining us from, right? So if you can enter into the chat, one of the things we really want to focus on in this session is just getting to know our guests and our would-be allies and our allies in training. As you have joined us for these last 3 sessions, we want to know more about you. We want to make sure that this event continues to be more and more interactive. So if you can let us know where you all are joining us from, that would be awesome. And we would also love for you to share one word describing your reaction to the 13th documentary. So, right, our homework for this session was to spend some time learning through documentary 13th, which we will be unpacking today. So yeah, if you can enter that into the chat, that would be fantastic.
And just really quick, Samantha, there are some things coming in that says the chat's disabled. So if you want to put it into the question and answer section right now, that will work just as well.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so we really want to make sure that you all drive the discussion, right? And we would encourage you to continue interacting and entering questions as soon as you have them and as often as you have them into what looks like to be the Q&A. Is that correct, Dan? That's the new direction?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yep, so just as a recap on that, we know that Zoom bombing has been a concern across the platform. So we have just our security settings set on the event that you won't be able to see each other's chats, and it looks like potentially the chat is not working at all right now. So we apologize for that, but we can assure you that we'll be able to see all of your interactions, and they are much appreciated and encouraged. So we know that we've had international representation in the past across our sessions. Again, this is our third in the Lean Into Allyship series, and we are so thrilled to know that across each of the sessions and their playback, we have had nearly, if not over 1,000 attendees joining in on this discussion and learning and unlearning alongside us, which is so incredible. We are so honored, Dan and I, for this little grassroots series that I've had the honor to partner with Dan and the oh so amazing Dr. G on, formally be aligned with Justified Anger for this session. And we've had a lot of growth and a lot of excitement in that way. So we'll talk about that later too. But really, this is about getting to know all of you all and where you're coming from, and again, just your sentiments around 13th. So as you guys are doing that, we again, just want to share that we know that this is a national, international discussion, but there might be times that we talk about Madison, Wisconsin specifically. That's where we are all based out of. That's where our panelists reside. And so although, we might specifically reference Madison or Wisconsin at large, this is, definitely a national conversation and certainly does apply to your community as well. We are just so extremely excited with the panelists that we have for you tonight. To be honest, the way that things transpired was a bit unexpected, and we are just so thrilled to have found ourselves in the presence of, of this group, and just incredibly, incredibly grateful. And we are ready to really just unpack the mass incarceration system outlined again in the documentary 13th. And we know that these panelists are, in my family, we try not to use the word busy, and we really just focus on intentionally full, but there is no denying that these panelists are just truly busy. And we are just so grateful that you are so generous to give your time to us tonight. So we do not take it for granted. And that really leads us into the recap that we start each session with. Dr. G has instilled in us that allies educate, affiliate, and donate. And so with that, we just want to strongly encourage you to consider donating to Nehemiah, Justified Anger, Dr. G's Black Like Me podcast, etc. I know that the panelists are also, affiliated with some excellent organizations and incredible work. And we can't and do not expect them to educate us for free. So we definitely do ask that everyone joining in does consider making a donation and practice that education, affiliation, and donating in your allyship growth. And also, for anyone, we also just like to share for Dan and I both work for American Family Insurance. This event is in no way, affiliated with AmFam, but we would say with anyone who is from AmFam on the call, because we know there are a lot of you, you can definitely reach out to us if you have any questions on how to get the AmFam corporate match for your donation. And we would encourage, anyone else to look into what their companies might be offering as well. And certainly these organizations would very likely qualify for that. So to jump right in, because we want to give as much as time as we can to our panelists, just the general flow of the evening is going to be a few minutes to talk about the Lean Into Allyship series and where we see this going, which is very, very exciting. And then we'll have about 60 minutes plus maybe on the panel discussion. We know we have set that 7 to 8 o'clock mark, but we also want to, we want to dive as deep as we can, with these individuals that we have with us. So 60 to 75 minutes of panel discussion. They have generously offered to go later and extend past that 8 p.m. cutoff. So we are absolutely opened to that. And we will stick to the promoted times moving forward. We know that, your times are valuable for everyone on the call. And that is something that we do want to stick to as closely as possible. And then from there, we'll just go into our closing remarks and we'll move on and let you know kind of what's happening next. So I will let Dan and Dr. G take it from here.
Thank you, Samantha. So I just wanted to echo what you just said, and that thanking the panel. It was a very short notice turnaround, and they all so willingly jumped and offered not only the 60 minutes, but additional time. And also wanted to share that I have the deepest respect for the 4 individuals that you're going to hear from tonight. And so I know, Dr. G, prior to the event, we wanted to just give a little update on the Lean Into Allyship series, just really quick. So initially this stemmed out of a conversation that Dr. G and I had as a result or in response to the Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd incidents. And it's really extended beyond that now. So we're excited to move into a partnership with Justified Anger and Nehemiah moving forward. And that said, we are also going to be wanting you as the attendees to drive how these events move forward. So we have a survey that if you haven't filled it out yet, we'll follow up with a survey link. We want to know what time works best, what topics are you looking for, what resources, so that you get the most value out of this moving forward. And so just wanted to let you know this will be a continued series. And what Dr. G has said is as long as we have people coming, we will continue holding these. And so that is our challenge, is to continue bringing your inner circle so we can continue to extend or expand these conversations. So is there anything else that you want to add to that, Dr. G, about the series before we jump in?
Well, I appreciate, I want to just share my appreciation, Dan, for you and Samantha, and also for the folks at Generator. I know that Lauren has said to us that we don't have to say that, but I'm very grateful for this platform. But I appreciate the energy and the excitement and the enthusiasm that you and Samantha bring to each of these. And I really appreciate it. sometimes people refer to a discussion as a conversation, knowing that it's just a one-time event. But when you two describe a conversation, you mean a conversation. It's ongoing. We may pause. Many times you and I, Dan, along with Don and others, will process the event. We'll talk throughout events. We'll think about how we market it. We'll come back together, and it feels like a real conversation. So I really appreciate that. And it's amazing to me that you reached out to me one weekend. I think we talked on a Saturday, and you just said, hey, if I get about 50 people together, would you talk to us as white allies or would-be allies about things that we can do? And it's months later, and we're still talking. And this is of encouragement to me, because I've been on talks recently where people have asked me to come in and basically make them feel good about how things are going in the country, not ignoring all of the atrocities that are happening, but show them the silver lining in it all. And I feel that if we don't feel or hold the tension of this moment, then it cheapens the idea of trying to work together for solutions. So I appreciate the fact that not only does the conversation continue, but I really appreciate the fact that we can hold the awkwardness of this together and still lean in together. So I just want to say I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for the folks. There are a lot of folks on this call, and I've looked at some of the Q&As, and I recognize some of the names from the East Coast and other places outside of Madison. So thank you all for being interested, because interest allows you to be involved. And when we can help to connect your head and your heart, then true action can take place. And we're hoping that this is a big step towards true action, wherever it is you live or work.
Awesome. And we are, so it's really exciting. I'm looking at the chat. We have people from California, Maryland, New Jersey, and definitely Madison. So this is truly a coast-to-coast conversation again, which is what we're excited for. And that said, we're going to just jump into the panel discussion. So in response to Samantha's question, I'm seeing overwhelming, is sickening. People are furious because of the video. That is, they were murders. So thank you for sharing all those words, horrified. So that is the response that our attendees have right now. And again, I want to reemphasize, there's a few questions coming in. Start adding in the questions that you have. If this turns into a speed round, that would be the best problem to have. But again, we have a couple that we'll kick off the discussion with. So just really quick to everyone on the panel, could you just briefly introduce yourself and just a brief overview of the work that you're a part of and do?
Well, good evening. My name is Jerome Dillard. I am the State Director of Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing. It's an organization of and by formerly incarcerated people. We've been around for a while, but I've been working with the jail prison population. I've worked inside a jail and a prison, and I'm also formerly incarcerated. I've been doing this work for about 17 years. Short end of it.
I'm Dr. Karen Reece. I'm the Vice President of Research and Education at Nehemiah. I've been on the payroll full-time since 2014 and started as a volunteer around about 2010-ish. But I go to Fountain of Life Church, of which Dr. G is the pastor since 2001. So been affiliated for a little while. I came into Nehemiah doing volunteer work focused on criminal justice reform, and we'll talk about a little later. I do a 3-part education series on the Wisconsin criminal justice system and mass incarceration. So that is my sort of the area I like to focus on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Cooper. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Reentry Services. For me, I've actually been with Nehemiah going on 8 years now. It seemed like time has flew by, but so I was also a person that was at one point in my life who was incarcerated. Decided to change my life around and been on that path from being able to work in a corporate setting and with additional other nonprofits, and as well as also a CEO of the Focused Interruption Coalition, where we work on violence prevention in the community.
And Dan, you introduced me earlier, but I'm Dr. Alex G, and I'm the president and founder of the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development. I'm also the pastor of Fountain of Life Church. And there's a very interesting circle that's here. I met Mr. Dillard from how many years ago?
About 24 years ago. Well, when I returned from incarceration in the state of Wisconsin.
And Jerome was the first individual I'd ever laid eyes on who was wearing an ankle bracelet. I think that he's the CEO of his own organization, and I'm the president of his board. Dr. Reece and I both serve as two of the members on the Expo board. And he started talking to me about his life and reentry into the community, and introduced me to the concept of reentry, what it was and what it wasn't. I was finishing up my doctoral dissertation, and I was writing about the impact of fatherlessness on the Black community. And just to round out a chapter, I called Jerome Dillard and said, does mass incarceration have, in your opinion, does mass incarceration have anything to do with fatherlessness? And he started shooting out links to me to Department of Justice and telling me to read the new Jim Crow and all of this stuff that's blowing me away. And it opened my eyes to this whole world that I was not aware of. And it drew me into a great sense of embarrassment and shame that as a Black male, I was not using my authority, my platform to talk about these issues. And so I'm sitting here with folks who have shaped reentry. Dr. Reece does so much research, helps us to write grants around these areas. Mr. Cooper is doing tremendous things in the community. So for the folks who are watching, I want you to know that these folks are really some of the community, the best and brightest thought leaders in reentry services in our community, and probably rank among those who do this statewide. You have folks running their own organizations. Dr. Reece is also adjunct faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Anthony Cooper, I met this gentleman when he was doing all kinds of things he should not have been doing. He just was appointed by our governor to be on the board that oversees our state's public defender. And so these folks are really deeply steeped in this. So bring the questions, let's have good discussion, and let's come with an open mind. And even the things that are painful and difficult to understand, let's lean into those.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'm also the son of a man who was often incarcerated. And I didn't realize that until my friendship with Jerome Dillard and others in talking and processing. I realized that one of the things that I just let slip into my subconsciousness is the fact that my father spent a lot of his adult life incarcerated in Illinois.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. G. The first question that we had, I wanted to just give a little background to what the documentary mentioned, and then I'll open it up with the question. But the documentary mentioned a few things. So it mentioned once arrested and convicted, that individual's gone. No one cares about them. Speaking to how once you're in the system, it's really hard to get out, if not impossible. Or so many aspects of the former Jim Crow become legal once you've been branded a criminal. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, we put them into prison with very little rehabilitation to allow them to re-enter society when they get out, and then they get out and we shun them. And so not only is it hard to get out of the system, but even once you do and re-enter, we wanted to just open up. Can you add context around those statements from your experiences? So take it from a documentary to the real life experiences that you've seen in both of those aspects.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll give that one a shot first. Well, what stands out to me in the documentary, that period right after Reconstruction, when the 13th Amendment was being used for peonage in the South. And that was, a form of slavery that replaced slavery itself. But they had to convict them in courts and in counties and turn them over to the sheriffs for them to rent them out as laborers or hand them over to landowners and business owners to build the New South, free labor. I do want to raise up the point that that period was worse than slavery, because so many people died in the coal mines and in the fields in Georgia, the coal mines of Alabama, Florida, all throughout the South. Individuals were being rounded up, arrested, charged, found guilty, and leased out, many times for not having a job. That stands out from the film to me, because those same tactics are being used still today. We use the criminal justice system to disenfranchise individuals throughout the country. But here in Wisconsin, I have to touch on how individuals in this community are cycling in and out of jail for no reason at all. Any allegation, you're thrown in jail in this state, and due process is pretty much non-existent when you're on community corrections in the state of Wisconsin. I'm gonna let Coop take the other part of that.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, and really what JD is referring to is crimeless revocations and things of that nature, that where, you know, when you have the X on your back, because that's basically what it is. It is basically you are the mark of death in some sense. When you're trying to look for a job, you're being overly questioned. Whether or not if you can, even if you do have the proper credentials for the job, it's still a steady push, and so that's one challenge. But then also, if at some point, if I'm never redeemed for what I've done, but yet I live a different life, then that means that 9 times out of 10, you're gonna always see me as some type of evil, right? And so, but in the same token, I'll also always put out there, as far as there's no one on this earth who is perfect. So all of us in one way or another have done something that has not been right, or has not always been fair. So how do you change that mentality? So you're holding mainly Black and brown people to one standard, and then also now to our other white brothers and sisters, then we're holding them to a different standard. There's no fairness at all. So what can we do about that? And I think, you know, the fact that we're even having this discussion is really bringing out these types of points. You're on mute, Karen.
How many times a day, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add the effect on families as well. I've, you know, had loved ones involved in the criminal justice system, and that mark that's placed on the person returning not only affects them, but their spouse, their children, any family members close to them. That stigma extends. If, you know, I'm a mother with a son who's been incarcerated, how do I talk to people in my communities, at my workplace, about that, friends for support, without being judged for that? Also, when people come home, families are often expecting, well, you've been gone for so long, now it's time for you to, you know, do your part and support the family, not really understanding how difficult it's going to be to get that job, or even understanding all the trauma that comes with incarceration and the emotional and psychological adjustment it takes to be out in the community. So it really is very complex, and you know, the more we can do to welcome someone home, the better off everyone will be.
And one thing I'll add is I've heard women who were formerly incarcerated, or those who work with them, say that when men are away in prison, many times the wife, the partner, the significant other will come and bring the children. But when a mother is in prison and her mother is watching the children, no one brings the children, or rarely are children brought to see their mothers. So when women go, it's a completely different scenario, and many of them are incarcerated because of abuse and trauma and rape that's taken place in their lives. And I'm sure I'll respond in more specifics to a question later on. But had I not witnessed some of the atrocities that are heaped upon men and women coming out of prison, had I not been sitting in the room watching it happen, I would not believe these things. There are things that Jerome Dillard told me happened that I didn't believe happened until I sat in a room and watched it happen, or experienced being profiled a few times myself by the police. But I'm sure we'll get into examples of that, but this is real, and it's happening all over this country, not just in Wisconsin.
So much, Dr. G. Yeah, we definitely will make sure to circle back and talk about that further. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add? We'll move on to the next question. We have some awesome questions coming in the chat, so thank you guys so much. Keep those coming. It's it's a task in itself to keep those straight. So we'll have lots of good content to dive into. But for this next question, I'd really like to ask our attendees to take a moment of self-reflection on how much we knew or thought we knew specifically about the war on drugs and the war on crime before watching 13th. And I just want to set up just that, that moment of reflection, just highlighting this quote that was shared from one of Richard Nixon's aides, who said, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So, just really sitting in that for a moment, I think just the words and the sentiments that have been coming in from our attendees about just, disgusted and, and furious and sickened and, enraged. I think that all of those feelings are absolutely appropriate, right? And we know that many politicians have since apologized for their role in crafting and promoting these legislative policies that carried out and perpetuated devastating impacts on Black Americans. But apology is clearly not enough. And considering the billions of dollars made off of, the often unjust imprisonment of people and the ongoing practice of prison labor, I would love if we could just unpack a little bit some insights into what steps would need to be taken to truly repay or begin to or attempt to repay and restore these criminalized and targeted communities and the families within.
Well, wow.
Can I just say something for just a moment, Jerome?
Okay.
No, I'm not going to answer the question, but Samantha, what you just read, I just think we just need to pause for like 5 seconds.
Yes.
And then that answer, you just stated that an aide from President Nixon admitted what Black men in barbershops, Black men in our churches, Black men who came back from Vietnam said. They said, this is a setup, y'all. They're trying to get us all drugged up. So could you just read the quote again? And can we just wait just 10 seconds and then let Jerome do it? Because for many people, that's foreign. Like, we're in this, we talk about this. Most people don't understand that this is enacted upon our community from the highest ranks, not only in this country, but in the world.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so he said, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
JD?
Okay, yeah, go ahead, JD.
Wow.
Damn.
What you just heard was what they call the Southern strategy. And that was on the heels of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. So they could no longer do things because of the color of someone's skin. And so this is part of the strategies that has went on for decades before this administration came into place, but the Southern strategy, and it's still in place. I want to say that the 94 crime bill that was signed by Bill Clinton did so much damage until it's pretty much it seems like it's irreversible, because there was incentives. This was a $26 billion piece of legislation to incentivize police, to build prisons, to pass truth in sentencing and 3-strike laws and all these tough on crime laws that just catastrophic, just sent the prison population in the stratosphere, really. I was part of that war on drugs. Okay. I was part of the war on drugs, and I went to federal prison when they first enacted what they called the new law, which was truth in sentencing. The feds lead the way in a lot of these changes that came about, but the fact is, truth in sentencing is really devastating to our communities and to this country. In the state of Wisconsin, we built 9 prisons and bought one between the year of 1994 and 2004. And we enacted truth in sentencing in 2000. And so our sentences are longer now, and there's no incentives for anyone to get out early under truth in sentence.
I just want to add a piece of, I can't get this out of my head. It's just the fact of what you read there. To me, what that really means is the fact that there's been war on Black and brown people from the start. And so because of that war, what ended up happening is the fact that now, because there are so many who don't quite understand it, then we end up having war against each other at the same time. Right. So when you go into, hey, why is it Black and Black crime? Why is those things happening? Because of the way how that whole thing was set up. What do? You trick people to be able to show them how they should fight against each other to be able to eventually to achieve something that is basically unachievable. Right. That's going to basically land them in a situation that at the end of the day, who's going to win? So we have, you know what I mean? Because basically, by my number 376451, basically I'm a number. But then also the time that I'm in prison is the fact that you're also getting paid from me, and also getting paid from with me. I'm sorry, from me, but then also by me, all at the same time. So it becomes a bigger part of the whole business plan, because that's what basically when we have the bigger discussion now. Only how the United States is ran, but then also Department of Corrections, things of that nature, that is all a business plan. And so when we really have to at some point, we have to unpack it, but then actually unpack it and then really put everything out there. Because I'm pretty sure he's not the only one who have said something similar to this that we just don't know about right now, that has been deducted from the from records and things of that nature. But for us to really talk about what does that war, not only what does it feel like, but then also the trauma that's behind it. I sold drugs, went to prison for selling drugs. Most of the people who I knew sold drugs, or in some sense, what that gives, again, the falsehood of what is something that is achievable. Because that alone is that's what's in front of me. No matter what the cost may be, but that's what's in front of me. What can we do to change that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, don't apologize, man. This is all about time. Yeah. I love one of the things that Mr. Dillard brought out about what President Clinton signed into law. He called it almost irreversible. Mm-hmm. Lest we be tempted to think that this is a Republican-led thing or a Democratic-led thing, that there is culpability on both sides of the aisle. And I think we need to name that and own that. There is not a party that is the right champion for this. The other thing is there is a national leader in the area of criminal justice reform. His name is Mark Maurer, and he wrote in his book Race to Incarcerate, mm-hmm. that the federal government was looking at closing down prisons in the early 70s because they weren't working, they weren't making money. Mm-hmm. And there was actually a movement to end prisons as we know them. When you have a movement like this, the war on drugs and all the other things that the others will speak to way more clearly, and then it begins to become a moneymaker, we have to begin to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. The narrative is that Black people are just genetically criminal. And then again, we'll get into this later, but when you look at things like crack cocaine and regular cocaine, and how there was a mandatory sentence with crack cocaine, the amounts of men who went to prison because of cocaine possession, crack cocaine possession, and the white men who did not do that, the difference it made to our community is irreversible. We will never get those years, those men who could have had children, those men who could have been fathers. We will never get that back. And so when Black people talk about system, and well-intentioned white people say, well, my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother came here and she found a job. She didn't have the president of the United States launching an all-out war against her. She was not incentivized to not marry her husband. It was a perfect storm. And so when people want to talk about crime and how we just need more fathers in our home, you're talking to the wrong crowd, because we've lived too much, we've seen too much, we've read too much. This goes all the way back up to presidents of the United States. This is like PBS, Netflix, conspiracy theory crap. And it happened. And so I just need people to understand, somehow a business that was going out of business became a thriving business in this country, to the point where some of the prisons are traded on the New York Stock Exchange and have been privatized. This is evil at its core, and it has robbed our Black community, while people point at us and say we're not taking care of business because they can't fathom a government that would launch something so egregious against Black people. Hello, for 400 years, we've been raped, beaten, stolen, cheated, lied to, lied on, and then blamed for things, and not given access to the very systems that we have helped to make world economic powers. And not only does this world exist, we live in it, we are its residents, and we lead the nation in how we treat people. We lead the world in how we treat people by over-incarceration. And it's heartbreaking.
And this is something that we focus on in our training in justified anger, because we think it's critical for you to understand how to build solutions to problems. You have to understand how they became problems in the first place. And that means knowing your true history. I would say probably the vast majority of people who watched 13th and who are on tonight had no idea some of this was part of our history. We go back to just forming the 13th Amendment, there being an angle for including that piece, except for those who have been convicted of a crime, that was very intentional. If we go back to this country's founding, we see over and over again very intentional moves that's baked into our legislation, our processes, our systems, and our institutions that keep this racial power dynamic. And we aren't taught that history in our schools. In some of the training that we do, our 9-week history class, we've had people with history PhDs come to us and say that they didn't know some of the things that they learned in our class. That's how strong these narratives are. And if you're feeling defensive listening, because that's a normal reaction, because a lot of the things that are being said are contrary to maybe what you used to believe or what you hope the world would be like, and that makes us defensive. But if you pause that for a minute and go back and look and see, does your frame of reference include all the facts, all the information? Probably it doesn't. And so then transfer that defensiveness to solving the problem instead of trying to explain your way out of it.
Thanks for that addition, Karen. And to kind of play off of what you just said about how 13th might be individuals' first time hearing some of those stats and history. So we have about 17 questions that have come in. So we're going to try to do a little bit more of a speed round. But one of them I wanted to play off of to that point, which is, were there aspects or points or perspectives regarding mass incarceration, prison industrial complex that 13th didn't even speak about that we should know about? Mm-hmm. This could even be in regards to the after effects. So again, it could be maybe what you started to talk about, Dr. G, with fatherlessness, but we'll let you kind of take that question wherever you would like.
Sure. I would say the impact of fatherlessness, that economic impact, that sociological impact is tremendous. I'm 56 years old. I have an earned doctorate degree. I own a home. My daughter has a graduate degree. All these things, and I still live with the impact of fatherlessness because of how my father moved from being a sharecropper in Mississippi to an incarcerated man in Chicago, Illinois. There's all kinds of economic things. And again, Jerome would talk to me about these things. It was just hard for me to fathom that could happen. I had to call a friend who is a stockbroker in Manhattan and ask him to do research on the industrialized prison system and its profitability. And he told me the trading symbols on the NASDAQ and that they've got a board. And I went and read their mission statement, and they guarantee a return. They guarantee a return on investment. Like they were talking about Holstein cattle. The money that it takes to incarcerate folks, that if you were to apply that to the men in prison, it's $70,000 to incarcerate a child in the state of Wisconsin because of all the other pieces that you need, the guardian ad litem. $70,000. You could buy that child a mentor, a home, and pay for college to keep them out. To find that money to do, and then the pipeline from prisons and so a pipeline from high schools and social services to prison it's amazing that folks who work in this field are still sane and sober. And then people are upset because you kneel during a song that perpetuates the same ideology that has underscored all of this. Yeah, there's parts of that and the fact that strike against individuals. And I've witnessed that happening, that strike against individuals. Dan, Samantha, I sat in a meeting with one of our colleagues, and one of my friends, a fraternity brother, offered him a job making probably more money than he's ever made legally, and a chance for benefits. And one of his stipulations in his plan, release plan, was that if he got gainful employment, he could move back in with his wife and his child. I watched his agent from the Department of Corrections pressure that employer. It was his company. Well, do you know that he's been incarcerated? Yes, I do. Yes, Reverend G brought him to me, but do you know why he went to prison? He went to prison for 13 years for this. Why divulge this to an employer? He checked the box. Do you know why he went? He just went on and on and on until my friend said, you know what? I'm done. And left the meeting. I sat there and I watched that happen. And to me, it wasn't a loss of job. It was a loss of an opportunity to regain his family. I watched that, and I think that was way more egregious what happened in 30 minutes than probably what happened to him in 13 years. And the fact that Jerome Dillard is still waiting for support services from when he was in prison and has not gotten them yet is just criminal. And that men and women come out of prison, they're off paper. When they get off paper, they can vote and do not even get a letter from the state of Wisconsin saying you now have the right to vote. So even when it is legal to do so, they made it very clear when they couldn't vote. And people in prison are counted in our census so that our state can get money, but they can't speak to these issues. It is a very sick business.
I want to just add something on to people in prison because that's are counted in the census. They are counted as residents of those counties and those cities where the prisons are. They're not counted in the communities from which they come from. That's prison gerrymandering, something that we're out against. But and I'll be short here, but to jump on things going on that the public may not be aware of, I just want to touch on something Alex said, because the war on drugs swept hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Black men out of their communities and into prisons. Those were the big brothers, the community leaders, the big brothers, the uncles, the fathers that I had, that a whole generation missed, because at one time there were, and it's still running neck and neck, there are more Black men in prison than there are in universities and colleges in this country at one period of time. I don't know how those numbers look today, but for years, Black men in prison outnumber men in higher learning. I want to say that, you know, I did time in a federal prison. I did time in the state of Wisconsin. And the fact is, when we return to the community, we're returning to the same situations, the same communities, the same hopelessness that existed before we left. And it's not hard to get caught into that revolving door. But community corrections has been a catalyst, especially in the state of Wisconsin. A report was released last Friday by Human Rights Watch and the ACLU, the National ACLU, on how community corrections is done in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Those are three of the states that they study. And the fact is, Wisconsin is one of the worst in the country because it's the leading cause of new admissions into our prison system in this state. And I believe Pennsylvania is running neck and neck with us, how they do community corrections. And so right now we're on a campaign of justice reinvestment. Community corrections can no longer function the way they do. Probation and parole officers have broad power in this state. They can come in your house and search at any time, and they do it. Regardless if you're living with your mother or you're living with a friend, they still have that right to come in at any time and go through your refrigerator, look in your cabinets, go in your closet without a warrant or any notice. That's one mild thing that they do, but there's a lot the public don't know, how individuals can be driving a car, and me and you would get a ticket if we're stopped by law enforcement. They have an 800 number. If they stop someone who's on paper, they call an 800 number, and 9 times out of 10, that number says, take them in. First of all, you had police contact, so that's one reason they can do that. And you sit there for 3, 4, 5 days, your job's gone, and then they just release you back into the streets. That shouldn't be. But I'm not going to drag this out any longer, but there's so many wrongs still going on within this system. I've had a 25-year-old parole officer. I'm trying to save a man's job, and I questioned her, and she got a little irritated, and she said to me, Jerome, I think he did it. That's why he's in jail.
No evidence whatsoever.
None whatsoever. I think he did it. And it wasn't a major crime or anything that we're talking about. We're talking about a girlfriend who's mad and who tried to retaliate, told him, I was just mad at him. But yet and still, they sent him back to prison for 18 months. And he didn't do anything. And she never testified against him or anything. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for saying that, JD. It just kind of just make me just think about where, when a person is on probation or parole, you are basically walking on eggshells the whole time. Jerome just used the example of someone can call and say, hey, he came to my house and he knocked on the door. This person can actually have could have been somewhere else at work or whatever the case may be, and it's proof that's there. They would say, they being Department of Corrections would say, hey, we have to investigate this. We have to arrest you. So every time a person is arrested through Department of Corrections, it's a restart on that person's life because they can hold them up to 45 days. So how many jobs are going to let you be off for 45 days before allow you to come back as your agent decides whether or not what they're going to do with you, if this allegation is true or false.
And the 45 days can be extended with supervisor approval.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So it is literally, it's either you stay so far underneath the radar, you almost have to be in some I guess in the sewer pipe or some sort to kind of make sure that nothing that you don't come across you don't talk to people, you make sure that you try to stay in good graces with everyone that's around you. You have this stigma that is basically, it's impossible to do, because at some point you're going to tick someone off. It could be the fact that you could be driving the wrong way and someone knows that you're on probation or parole, you flick them off or they flick you off, but then also now you're in this situation because of that, because they feel threatened. It's
crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So Dan, you got 16 more questions, so we're going to try to answer them short. We're going to see how many of those we can get through. No, that's good stuff, y'all.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take a next one. It's hard enough when it's just Dr. G and his brilliance, but now having you all two just dropping nuggets and truth bombs, and there's so much to talk about, and everything you guys say, we need like another hour. But I thought we could quick visit. Rishan had asked, can you talk more about a comment that was made saying that she was incentivized to not marry her husband? And I think, Dr. G, you had said that, and I think that's one of those moments where, you all just have so much intellect. We have so much to learn, and we are here to do that. And I think that sometimes, like things are said in passing that blows our mind, and then we don't have a chance to revisit it. So that, I don't remember exactly who said that, but if we could speak to that, that would be amazing.
Sure. There was a movie made in the 70s called Claudine, and it starred James Earl Jones and Diane Carroll. I would encourage people to watch it. But it depicts that. So while all of these things are happening in terms of war on drugs flowing our community, white flight, the loss of tax base in cities, northern migration, the federal government's giving welfare to Black women and incentivizing them to not marry. You could receive those benefits to take care of your family if you did not marry. So you have this push to incarcerate, to put drugs in a community, and for Black women to not marry. 20 years later, or even right then, you have Daniel Moynihan and others talking about what's wrong with the Black family. All of these things happen to dismantle the family, because at that point, in terms of what we call intact, the Black family at my time of my birth in 1963 was more intact than the white family at the time. And so when we look at where we are today, people don't know the history. They pointed towards just men not wanting to be there. So many things happen. So again, in order to qualify for welfare benefits, women had to not marry in order to take care of their children. And so that meant marriage in a lot of places just stopped. That was not the case in the Black family.
And also they couldn't get caught with the father living in the household.
Right.
If they were caught doing that, then benefits would end.
Right.
And you have to be able to feed your children. I mean, most people here would do whatever it takes to feed their children if it comes down to that level. And this is what it took.
It was the first time in U.S. history that the Black man did not have a place in his family.
Right.
The first time, even on slave plantations, on sharecropping farms, we still had a place. It was the first time we did not have a place. And Black men were depressed and distraught. Drugs show up on the street. They're trying to find their places of power. It was devastating. And what's sick is not just that it happened, but that someone planned it.
So we have a couple questions that have come in similar. So Maggie and as well as Helen wanted to talk about, make sure they understand this. How can inmates be placed on an ankle bracelet and forced to pay for it and then be penalized with more time or turned over to collections if they can't afford to pay the costly bill? They want to know that they're understanding it correctly. And Maggie said, could we just talk a little bit more about the electronic monitoring as well?
Yeah, if I could jump in on that with just a couple definitions. So there's a few different kinds of electronic monitoring, and these vary, of course, all over the country, but in general, this holds. There's a bail monitoring program. So after a person is arraigned on a charge or they're accused of something, to the period where they appear in court, a person can be on an electronic monitor through that time. It can also be sentenced to what most of us know as house arrest on an electronic monitor. And this is post-conviction. They'd serve out their sentence on a monitor. And then the third variation of that is during community supervision or extended supervision on probation or parole, a person can be sanctioned and put on, say they violate a rule, they can be put on a GPS monitor for that. And then people who have been convicted of certain sex offenses can be placed on an electronic monitor during their, once they're released from prison. And in some cases, for certain kinds of sex offenses, people are placed on lifetime monitoring. So even though they're done with the criminal justice system, they have to wear an ankle bracelet for the rest of their lives. And yes, they do have to pay for it. There's no way around paying for it. There is some sliding scale that happens. There's a tiny bit of discretion that comes into that. But for the most part, those fees just rack up. And at the end of the day, they're going to be a judgment on a person's credit. They're going to go towards collections. there's another version of if a person owes certain fees during probation. That's true in Wisconsin. I'm not sure what other states it holds in, but probation can actually be extended if a person has not paid off their restitution or their fees. So they're supposed to get a court hearing, but oftentimes the parole agent, probation agent, will have the person sign a form saying they agree to have their sentence extended so they can pay off the fee. I just wanted to throw the definitions out there.
Yeah, I've seen more and more of that too, individuals being extended because of fines and fees. And I'm wondering if we have an argument of debtor's prison, really, because my friend, God bless him, who passed away not too long ago, you know Fred Clark well, yourself, Dr. G. He was extended for almost 10 years and did not live in the state. He was being supervised in Louisiana. He moved back to take care of his folks who were aging. And they kept extending it for 1 year, for 1 year, for 1 year, because he owed $40,000 in restitution, which, you know, was impossible for him to make that. So that is something that a lot of people are totally not aware of. And not only that, but you're working in the community, you're paying taxes, and you have no say in who governs or who represents you in City Hall or in DC or in the Capitol, the state Capitol. You have no say. Even on your children's school board, you have no say. But we're working, we're paying taxes, and I feel that, you know, taxation without representation is wrong. It is the very thing that this country was founded on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the only thing I would just add to that, as far as the bracelet, is just basically it's an extended prison in some sense for many, for the ones who are out here, whether if they have a sexual offense or if they're just out here because they may have had some infraction, probation violation or whatnot, and that is being extended. Those are all challenges that I think that, you know, that everyone, myself, Jerome, we often call him JD. I keep saying it. I want to say Jerome. It's hard for me to say Jerome. But then also Pastor G as well as Karen, is the fact these are the things that what we fight against. And when we're getting these phone calls when people are incarcerated, I got a call quite a few calls since we've been on the chat right now, you know, and so those are just the things that why the men and women are still figuring out, like, why am I even incarcerated, right? But a lot of times it is because sometimes they owe fees. I had quite a few people that it goes from 1 year to even sometimes 3 years, depending on how much they owe. You know, like Jerome had just mentioned, $40,000 is impossible for someone who may be earning $12 an hour and also trying to live, right, as much as possible.
That's good.
Right, and then also the electronic monitoring. Early on it was pushed as a great alternative to incarceration, and it is great to be out in the community, but when you're held under, and again, we have to stress the constant daily stress that comes along with being under these forms of supervision. Think about if you have a really big presentation to give at your job, and you know that's coming in a month, and you know your raise depends on it. Having that weight on your head, just think about how that makes you feel on a day-to-day basis. Now imagine your life and your freedom being at stake on a daily basis because you might violate a rule. You might get a speeding ticket and have police contact. Sometimes it is that simple. Think of how that weight over the course of years would affect your life. Some people can handle that stress. Other people can't handle that stress. And there are very limited resources out here to support people under that stress. Now with the electronic monitor, you're essentially beholden. Most are going to GPS. Early days, it was radio frequency. You had to be very close to a little beacon that stayed in your home that measured how far away you were. These days, it's GPS. that can basically pinpoint wherever you are on a map, just like with your cell phone. And if your signal goes away, if you don't keep your bracelet charged, imagine how many times your cell phone goes dead without planning on it. You can be reincarcerated. For people who are on the bracelet for a sexual offense, if their monitor goes out for a certain period of time, like 10 minutes, it's a mandatory arrest. That's a law in Wisconsin. They automatically go back to jail.
After 15 minutes.
15 minutes, yep.
If you're off for 15 minutes, you have to go to jail.
And say you go in a place with a poor signal. That's another way you could lose signal. So these laws get put on the books in the spirit of tough on crime, but no one's going to think through how are they implemented? What is the reality of these laws once they get passed? And the other thing we don't do anywhere in this country is once a law is passed in the spirit of improvement, no one goes back and evaluates it to see if it's doing what it was supposed to do in the beginning. And no one has the ability to admit that they were wrong when they pushed this legislation through. We should be able to admit that we didn't get it right the first time.
And just a really quick, Samantha, you're on mute. Just a really quick question that on the monitoring really fast, then we'll go to another one. Alex wants to know, does that debt get passed on to the surviving family, and does that further perpetuate the problem? So if you can't pay?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if that would get passed on to the estate. Because it's charged as a civil judgment, so I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well,
Good question.
you know, when I returned, I owed several $1,000s, and my PO just put a standing judgment. She's like, "You still owe your money. You're gonna have this judgment, but I'm gonna let you discharge, and I'll make sure you get a letter stating your rights. There's a reinstatement of my voting rights and what I could and could not have. That was mailed to me. That doesn't exist today. If anything, they've really enforced. And what's mind-boggling to me is so many formerly incarcerated people in our community who are no longer on paper are in the mindset that they do not have a right to vote.
Right.
And that's just an indication to me of how that message is pushed. You can't vote. You can't vote. You're a felon. You can't vote. You can't vote. But in our state, once you're done, you can vote, which many are in the community for 10 years working and paying taxes, and they can't vote because they're on paper. That has to change.
Samantha, you better jump in with your question.
Okay, taking them on. So we've had quite a few questions around for-profit prisons and corporate labor. We've had a lot of questions around that and just, the horrific nature and the atrocity that this is, that this is so broadly a thing. AJ had asked, are there incarcerated people in Wisconsin who are being used for corporate labor?
Well, Dr. J, we visit what was then Badger State Industry.
Badger State Industries.
Yeah, they changed
In Madison, Wisconsin, in the old AmFam building on East Washington.
Yeah, they have a showroom in the Department of Corrections where they bring businessmen into that building and take them and show them the furniture and the clothing that are being made by individuals inside state prisons. Beautiful stuff. And so, yeah, it's a big thing.
I was told, Reverend G, don't go to stores and buy furniture. We have beautifully and ergonomically designed furniture that we can sell you at a good price that men and women in Wisconsin prisons have made. I saw sweatshirts, I saw desks, I saw tables, I saw chairs. I took a picture of the signs so that I could write an article on something. So I have evidence that this has happened. And the mission says we give men and women basically job training skills that would help them to be successful. And I've watched their very agents talk these men and women out of these jobs that they're trying to get. Yes, it happens in Wisconsin every day.
Yeah,
and there's actually a state law that the University of Wisconsin is required to consider purchasing furniture from Badger State Industries before they get bids from anywhere else.
Yeah, the UW.
Again, that goes right back to the business plan. Right? So if you're paying these men and women 13 cents an hour for furniture, right, or office furniture that is 9 times out of 10 is being sold for $13,000 or $1,300 an hour per set, desk, whatever the case may be, that's just modern day slavery. Period. That's modern day. That is the true definition of a sweatshop in some sense. And I mean, from my point of view, that's a sweatshop.
And the other
I'm not saying. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Finish.
No, I'm just thinking that. But those are the things that we know are not. Yeah, they're happening here in Wisconsin. They're happening in other places too.
All over the, yeah.
Yeah, all over the state.
All over the country.
I mean, I'm sorry, over the country. I mean,
yeah.
So
another piece of that is people who are getting out on work release. So we have people who are sentenced to life in prison who are working 40 plus hours a week in the community without almost no supervision at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not in the public interest to release them. These folks are working at incentivized wage for these companies, and the companies will keep them on. They often won't keep them on once they're released. And so that benefit just isn't there.
And something a lot of people don't know, when you have work release, you have to pay rent
Right.
to the Department of Corrections to live in prison. You do. You have to pay. If you're going out on work release, in some cases, it's $700 a month that you pay back into the Department of Corrections because you go out and make work a regular job, $12, $13, $14 an hour. And that's where our centers, what we call our correctional centers, that's where they have the work release program. But they pay rent, roughly $700, which their families could use that money.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And so we have a few related questions. So this probably isn't fair to ask, but there's probably 3 or 4 that are grouped. So can you comment on the statistic that 1 in 10 Black men in their 30s are in prison or jail? And then how has the Southern strategy changed? And that came from John. And then Breshawn, similarly, along the same vein, said, as the conversation on crime and mass incarceration is shifting, what are you seeing as the next thing that we need to be worried about, and how can we be proactive in pushing against it? So how are things evolving?
I like the second question because these systems have a way of reproducing themselves or in a whole different form, but it does the same thing. That's the history of our nation, and that's an excellent question.
Yeah. I think that there's so much right now. I think, to me, I feel as though that right now we do just have to be more mindful and to try to catch whatever the new thing is, and then really bucking up against the system in the moment. I mean, just like what Samantha had read earlier, think about how long ago that was, but right now we're just now talking about it, or we're just now having the conversation about it. Maybe, you know, hit and miss kind of here and there or whatever, but that he basically told you this is a war. Again, at some point, we have to be prepared for war all over again, right? Because we know that it's coming, because it's actually already here, but it's underneath the umbrella of, hey, you know what? This person committed a crime that we had no other choice but to arrest it. We had no other choice but to give him 10 to 20 years or whatever for something that was a nonviolent crime or something, or maybe even an addiction for that matter. It's different ways. I mean, or now we're talking about being able to help and provide services for people with mental health challenges and things of that nature. But what happens first, we go ahead and we arrest them, put them in a treatment center far, far, far away somewhere, 5, 10, or maybe even 15 years with the hope of them coming back. Prison does not change anyone. I just, people need to understand that it does not change anyone.
It does negatively.
Yeah, negatively, right? Negatively. Thank you for saying that, G. But you know what I mean. But it does not put anyone in a positive of space of, hey, I want to be able to do something different with my life. And this is me as someone who is a former prisoner. Is the fact that, hey, what made me change my life was my sons, and me wanting to provide something different for their life. That's what made me change my life. me sitting there not doing nothing or basically trying to sit through a program to the program, that wasn't changing my life at all. So sorry.
Don't be sorry, Coop. Thank you for
sharing.
Yeah,
because I know we're pressed for time, so I'm trying to get it out and stop.
There was a study that was done at the University of Milwaukee in 2013 that stated that one in every 8 Black adults in Wisconsin are currently in prison.
Yep.
Well, State Journal had a report back right around the race to equity report that said for men under 21 years of age, between 18 and 21, 1 out of 3 had a connection with corrections. 1 out of 3 Black.
1 out of 2.
1 out of 2.
1 out of 2. Yeah, I was thinking
in Madison, Wisconsin, and Dane County, for Black men between 18 and 21. Just think about that.
Wow.
And we also know this, for those that don't know Madison, there's more crime that takes place on State Street than what takes place on Badger Road or Park Street. You get what you look for. If people were to police State Street the way they police other kinds of neighborhoods, you'd find what you look for. But just think about that. But when you think of crime in a place like Madison, you think of a place where we live and where we work, yet there's more crime with white students down near campus.
Definitely. I know maybe we have time for one more. There's so many good ones. Maybe we can do a couple more, but I think I wanted to pull back to just the documentary itself, right? So the documentary ended with Bryan Stevenson saying, how could people have tolerated slavery, gone to a lynching, or made sense of segregation? That's so crazy. I would never have tolerated that. But the truth is, we are living in that time and we are tolerating it, right? So just to tie back and tie in, bring together just the sentiments of everything that we have said, right? Just another really deep reflection moment. I'm just going to read that again and we can all sit with that for a moment. Bryan Stevenson with EJI had said, many people say, how could people have tolerated slavery, gone to a lynching, or made sense of segregation? That's so crazy. I would have never tolerated that. But the truth is, we are living in that time and we are tolerating it. Mm-hmm. So across the documentary, right, there are just endless stats and history lessons, provided. And, the 4 of you have just really helped continue, to build that dialogue and help us unpack it even further. But we, as viewers, as would-be allies, as white Americans, those of us on the call today, many of us still have the privilege of being removed from that reality, right? All about, we are conditioned to blame and dehumanize the oppressed, right? And we are conditioned to identify with the oppressors, and it all is, it's strategic, it's very tactically aligned. I know you guys have talked about so many moments of this in your own work and so many, of your own personal experiences and what you know, but I would say just anything additional from your work that you, would bring to life as far as, the emotion behind those stats. And just the truth behind, the build of that history, those real life human impacts.
Samantha, it was the diabolical narrative. The narrative was that Black people were dirty, they were evil, they were ungodly, and they were going to contaminate our community and they were going to take our rights. Mm-hmm. And so fear was stoked in the hearts, particularly of poor whites, because socially their class butted up against Blacks who are striving to move up. You fast forward today, it's still the same kind of fear, Willie Horton and stuff. It's the fear that we're criminals, we are rapists, and we're all of these things. And so when people see the statistics, they think, wow, what we heard was true. They really are criminal. They really are diabolical. They don't raise their children, and they fight each other in the streets, and they live in these tall high rises. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is a very evil plot to give an image to folks and then incarcerate, give drugs, incentivize to break down the family and say, that's what I was telling you. So if you don't know Black people, if you don't read these issues, if you don't lead into these issues, and I'd encourage people who are here on this call but still did not watch 13th, you need to. I think by not having real context, real relationships, it's very easy to believe this.
Mm-hmm.
I do the annual workshop series about the criminal justice system, and one of the things that happens every time without fail is in the middle of me speaking, someone will stop and say, wait, say that again? That can't be real. Because it doesn't seem logical, right? Because these systems are set up for people to fail. It's just so important that we look in this direction. I think one of the statement about how could we have lived during slavery, well, most people probably never went to a lynching, but it was happening somewhere. Most people didn't own slaves, but we knew where slaves were owned. We bought and sold products that were made by slaves. We participated in an economy. Some of us even benefited by having a job, working on that labor. Many people benefit from having a job in the prison system, working as a correctional officer or a healthcare professional. I mean, we're right here, right now. And these atrocities are literally broadcast now that we have social media, right? So we can see them. What are you going to do about it now? Can you live with it now? If you didn't think you could live with slavery and lynching, you don't know what you would have done. What are you doing now? Because it hasn't ended.
And that might, Karen, be a perfect segue into our last, it's going to be the last question of the evening, but we will talk about a part 2 before we're done with this, because we still have 15 to 17 questions. So that's the best problem we could have had. But to what you just said about action, and we want to end all of these calls with what should we be doing? And this is the $1 million question. So we'd like to hear from each one of you. Julie and others have asked, what ways can we get involved? I would say locally in Madison is the question, but think also for those who are in California or Maryland, what can they do to get involved? And then for the would-be allies, what other things should we be looking into to start changing the system?
I say educate, donate, and affiliate. So stay a part of the series. Follow some of the links that tell you how to know to take the next steps. Email us. I think one of our producers is dropping in an email, info@nehemiah.org. Say, I want to be on a mailing list. I want to know we have an upcoming reentry conference. Are we showing any of that stuff tonight?
We are. We're going to do a promo for that.
Okay,
I would just say we have some things coming up so that you can really educate yourselves, because this is taking money away that could be used to educate all of our children, build strong relationships, build our communities, economic development. Jerome, Karen, what's the Department of Correction budget for the state of Wisconsin?
$1.3
billion
per year.
Per
year. Biannual, so it's $2.6 billion because Wisconsin does biannual budgets.
You redirect some of that those dollars, you give that to organizations that has community-based solutions. You can change the world. So one thing people can do, sign up for this reentry conference, because we are mobilizing people. We're going to need people to show up at meetings, to write letters, to write emails, to make phone calls, to support efforts that Jerome Dillard is doing through Expo. There are great organizations that are challenging policies and trying to correct policies. We need the masses. And listen, you all, we know this. We can design it. But when white people become angry about things and begin to write letters and get involved, people listen differently than just us. So please join our mailing list so we can let you know what's going on. And we will direct you to organizations, efforts, letter writing campaigns, meetings when we come together again. But we have learn and lunch. We have lunch and learn, where we're talking more about this. Yeah, thank you. So please get on our mailing list. Anyone else want to jump in while these things are showing?
Well, I want to say, oh boy.
I'm sorry, can I just say while the reentry conference is up, Jerome, can Coop just say something about this while this is up? Coop, can you just say something about the reentry conference?
I mean, Pastor G, you really said a lot. I think really just what I would really say to that question is the whole thing is definitely stand up, participate, and also do not allow your voice to be heard when you know something is wrong. And then definitely come and join us with our reentry conference so we can have a further conversation, but then also there will be action items behind that as well. And then you guys just think of the people that we have that we ask have added to be a part of that conference, from Judge Everett Mitchell to Tamara, to Dominique Gilliard, from the state attorney, Kelly Thompson, and others that will be joining us as well, and to really not only talk about what we should be doing, but how we're going to get there together.
And if you work for companies that's socially conscious, this conference is looking for more corporate sponsors.
Right, yeah.
So if you have any say-so on how community dollars are redirected, reach out to us, contact us. We would love for your agency to be a sponsor. Sponsor.
Yeah, what can I say on the heels of that? Be involved, be educated, but also get engaged in some of the budget hearings, the finance committee's hearings, and ask your representative to put more money into treatment alternatives and diversions. That's one way of working on the front end of mass incarceration. Let's get more diversion courts. Let's get more treatment courts open. And also support us in our justice reinvestment movement. Deferring money from the Department of Corrections into the community, where people like Coop and Aaron and myself and other programs around the state will be funded to take care of those who we understand, who are a part of us. I believe in peer support. I know it works, but we have to be able to hire people to do those jobs. So support us in treatment justice reinvestment. That's it.
And then hold your elected officials accountable. We hear all the time that they hear a lot about things like beautifying lakes and related issues, but the phones aren't ringing off the hook, generally speaking, about these issues. Call them, write them. It's their job to hear from us and represent our voice. A lot of the laws, the harmful laws we've been talking about, slip through because people aren't paying attention, or sometimes they're pushed through under the guise of, we're all safer if we're tough on crime. We need to start paying attention to the legislation that's moving through our elected bodies, legislative bodies, and we need to demand that our elected officials are transparent about what's coming through. Pay attention to that, right? Call, be there, be eyes and ears.
Awesome. Thank you all for kind of rounding out the discussion. And so there's a couple more slides. I'm not sure if Dr. G, you want to speak to these, but I did receive these just before the event, actually, talking about the YouTube channel or the criminal justice workshop series that will be coming up.
Sure. I think we'll check out the channel because, and folks, Jerome talked about helping to support special kind of legislation. Because if you'd like more information, we can actually send you links to this information so you don't have to feel like you're cold. We can even draft letters that you can use and doctor up to send to your elected officials. We will resource you to do that. We have a YouTube channel with Justified Anger where you can see videos and things we made. Check it out. Coop has already talked about the reentry conference. Register for it. But Dr. Karen Reece does a phenomenal criminal justice workshop series. And we need to get hundreds and hundreds of folks there. We need to get lawyers there. We need to get law students there. We need to get just general folks to understand this work. So please, these are you asked for next steps. These are things you could and should do. So please take advantage of this information.
And then just the last slide again was, I think, about the lunch and learn, but I think we already spoke to that. And if there anything else that anyone wants to say about the Bridging the Gap?
You can find those videos on at the website that's listed there. And those are also on the Justified Anger YouTube channel.
Awesome. And we will send, so I know we got some questions first about the videos of the first two events. We will make sure we get those out to everyone. So that's awesome that there's interest to now go back and listen to those. And then we will get, maybe not this PowerPoint, but there will be all of this content delivered to everyone who's attended this session as well. We did have a quick, I think there were 17, now there's still 20 comments in the Q&A. We are, I'm not going to promise who will come back, but we will make a part 2 of this. So this was an incredible response rate. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the 4 panel members right now, but we will make sure that we have some individuals who will speak and continue the conversation. We are overwhelmed with the response and the engagement, and so that is exactly what we are hoping for tonight. And so just a quick round of applause for Dr. G, Anthony Cooper, Dr. Karen Reece, and Jerome Dillard. Thank you all for giving us your time tonight. Sorry that we had to cut you off because we had so many questions to get through. That is not typically what we like to do. And then there is the author, Ibram Kendi. We will send out some information. There's a series that he's going to be doing, and I think I actually have a slide for it, which is every night coming up starting August 16th. He's going to be talking with Robin DiAngelo, Brian Stevenson, various individuals. So again, yet another opportunity to educate with various perspectives. So something that, again, if you have the time, we will share that. And then just the last promo, the 13th, there is a guide that is for you to work with your center of influence and ask these types of questions with your friends and family. That is a resource that is provided by Nehemiah as well. So we will make sure to get that information out to have the discussion and keep it going. So with that, I'll turn over to Samantha to close us up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan. I think just a final message to everyone on the call tonight. We're so grateful for your participation. It's amazing to have you here with us for this discussion. And just that reminder, right, that being here tonight, you are taking action to break the cycle of the systems, right? And you are taking action to move the Black Lives Matter movement forward. We continue to receive your notes and your feedback of so many of the things and that you've been doing and the actions you've been taking to grow in your allyship since we first started this event. Dan and I have been learning and unlearning, as we say, and growing right alongside each of you. And we just always want to be sure to stress that in every discussion, allyship is a practice, right? And we, as long as we are moving forward from where we began, and truly committing to that growth, that is, that's a powerful, beneficial commitment that we can make to the world around us. I think, again, just that reminder and that acknowledgement that we are conditioned to blame and dehumanize the oppressed and to identify with the oppressors. And I think that I'm not sure if there is a stronger representation of the way that works than 13th. And if you had a chance to watch it before this event, excellent. Watch it again. If you didn't have a chance, definitely go and watch it. But if you already have watched it, watch it again. I think at this point, I've probably watched it 5 times, and every time it continues to blow my mind, and I have more and more questions. And I think that something that large and that broad should be revisited time and time again. And again, we're so grateful to have a chance to continue to dive into and unpack that work. Just as Karen said earlier, it is so crucial that we acknowledge history and the injustice of today, and instead of getting defensive, use that power, use that response within us to join the movement and commit to being the change, because we all have that opportunity within us. We want to leave you with 3 requests that will come in a follow-up email. Again, we've had a lot of comments and requests for links and playbacks and a lot of the excellent resources that have been promoted throughout this, so we will not leave you hanging. We will wrap all of that up and send that out to you. And again, just our 3 requests from our end is, again, to please donate to Nehemiah for the gracious time of everyone on this call to educate us over this last almost hour and a half. The information, again, will come in that follow-up email. And we really want to make sure to continue producing these events as valuable as possible for everyone that is joining us time after time. So to do that, we will be sending out a short survey afterwards to continue gathering your feedback to improve for future events, right? Like, we are open to shifting and leaning into what works for everyone as we all come alongside this. It will take less than 1 minute to complete. So when you see that, please do take the time to take that survey. And then finally, just regarding our next event in the series, look out for mid to late September for our next conversation. So that's kind of to be determined on the feedback that you provide us and what works for our panelists. We want to respect school starting, you know, early September as well. So we'll have a bit of a break, but we can't wait to reconnect with you all and continue this growth in about a month and a half or so. And just again, final sincere, deepest gratitude for our panelists, Karen, Jerome, Coop, and Dr. G. Thank you so much and bless you. Thanks to everyone on the call tonight. And I think that's it. Anybody else have anything to add?
Have a good night.
Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.